In this video, we will dive into the movie King Kong 2005. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie's production details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide the reviews and personal reaction. Let's begin with the movie story. It is directed by Peter Jackson, producer Peter Jackson, Chan Blinken, Caroline Cunningham, Fran Vlash, writer Fran Lash, Philippa Boyers, and Peter Jackson, starring Naomi Watts, Jack Black, Adrian Brody, Thomas Kertzman, Colin Hanks, Jimmy Bell, Yvonne Park, Andy Serkis. Music by James Wharton Howard. Editor Jamie Selker. Distributor Universal Picture. Running time is 200 minutes. King Kong is a 2005 New Zealand German American epic horror action adventure fantasy monster film which is a remake of the 1933 and 1976 films of the same name. The film was released on December 14, 2005 and made an opening of $50 million. While the film performed lower than expectations, King Kong made domestic and worldwide grossed that eventually added up to $550 million, becoming the fourth highest grossing movie in Universal Studios history. Strong DVD sales also added over $100 million to the grosses. It also receives positive reviews, with someone considering it one of the all-around best movies of 2005. Though it has been criticized for its length at 3 hours and 8 minutes, while our 3-disc extended DVD editions additionally increase this to over 3 hours and 20 minutes. It won Academy Award for Visual Effects, Sound Mixing, and Sound Editing. The film opens in New York City 1933 at the height of the Great Depression. Having lost her job as a vaudeville actress, beautiful Ann Darrow is hired by troubled filmmaker Carl Denham to be an actress in his new motion picture. With time running out, Anne signs on when she learns her favorite playwright Jack Driscoll is the screenwriter. On the SS Venture, they slow fall in love. As for Carol, arranged it out for his arrest, and Captain Ildhorn begins to have second thoughts, following the fears of his crew over the legend of Skull Island. Despite his attempt to turn around, their ship is sucked up into a fog and crashes into the rocks encircling the island. Carroll and his film crew land to explore the island and discover a village built in front of an enormous wall, but they are attacked by the vicious natives. Mike, the sound technician, is spreaded. One of the sailors has his head crushed and Jack is knocked out. Anne screams and a roar beyond the walls responds. The matriarch vows to sacrifice her to Kong, a 25-feet gorilla. Eaglehorn and his crew break up the attack and return to the damaged ships. They finally lighten the load to steer away until Jack discovers Anne has been kidnapped. Barefoot and wearing only a beef robe over a pink nightgown, Anne is forcibly dragged by the natives to a drawbridge atop the wall, where she is offered as a sacrifice to Kong. Kong is revealed to be a colossal 25-foot tall, prehistoric gorilla. The crew comes armed but are too late. Carol sees the gorilla has taken her. Eaglehorn gives them 24 hours to find her. In the meantime, Anne discovers the remains of the previous sacrifice and stabs Kong's hand with her criminal necklace to evil. Kong takes Anne into the jungles of the islands. Captain Eaglehorn organizes a rescue party to find Anne and head down the beast. The rescue party is caught up in a Venatorius packs hunt off Bronturius and four of them are killed while Jack and the rest of the crew survive. Anne manages to entertain Kong with juggling and dancing, but he does not kill her when she refuses to continue, leaving her instead. The rest of the rescue party come across a swamp. It is here that Bruce Baxter and two others leave the group. The survivors stumble across a log where Kong attacks, shaking them off the log into a ravine. He returns to rescue Anne from three Vestorius Rexes, modern Tyrannosaurs, and takes her up to his mountain lair. Eaglehorn and the rest of the crew rescue whoever is left of the rescue party from the pit of giant insect. And as Jack decided to continue to search for Anne, Carol decided to capture Kong. Jack comes to Kong's lair, disturbing him from his slumber as Kong fights a swarm of giant bats, and Jack escapes by grabbing the wing of a Pteropodix and then jumping to a river. They arrive at the village wall with the angry Kong following them, where Anne becomes distraught by what Carol plans to do. Kong bursts through the gate and struggles to get her back, killing several sailors but is subdued when Carol knocks him out with chloroform. In New York around Christmas, Carol presents Kong, the eighth wonder of the world, on Broadway. The giant ape is miserable and exhausted, missing his home. Anne has become an enormous Choruskull and a double of her is no replacement for Kong. Kong is enraged by his already adding to his anger of being taken away from his home. Camera flashes from photographers also finally pushing him over the edge. Kong explodes into his biggest stage and he breaks free from his chrome steel chains. The audience watching screams and flees in panic as Kong destroys the theater and escapes into the city. Still fueled with rage, Kong goes on a rampage and kills 87 citizens in Times Square. In the midst of his rage, he also desperately searches for Anne. Jack, watching the rampage, drives as abandoned taxi towards Kong to use himself as a diversion to lure Kong out of the city. As Kong lures Jack for taking Anne away from him. The diversion temporarily works and Kong chases Jack in the taxi across town. However, before Jack can successfully lure Kong out of the town, the enraged ape knocks him out by stopping the taxi and flipping it. Just then, Kong encounters Anne again, immediately calming him down. They share a quiet moment on a frozen log in Central Park before the army attacks. Kong climbs onto the Empire State Building where he makes his last stand against the F-8C-4 Serkis hull diver B-planes, downing three of them. Ultimately, Kong is hit by several bursts of gunfire from the surviving planes and gazes as a distraught Anne for the last time before being fatally shot by one plane and waving his love as he dies on the building. His lifeless body falls to the ground, ending Kong's magnificent life. Anne is reunited with Jack and the reporters flood to Kong's corpse. Carl takes one last look and says it was not the airplanes, it was beauty that killed the beast. Jack Driscoll is a screenwriter instead of the first mate of the venture. Carl Denham is a scheming director full of standards. The Skull Islanders are more savage and bloodthirsty than they were in the original. Captain Eaglehorn is German and has a bit of antagonist relationship with Denham than from the 1933 film. Naomi Watts as Ann Darrow, Jack Bragg as Carl Denham, Adrian Brody as Jack Driscoll, Jip Murphy as Winter Crewman, Toyawaka as Winter Crewman 15, New York Part 2, Julia Wilhelm as Woman at Broadway Show, set decoration by Simon Bright. Second junior director are Mark Ashen. Screenplay development. Peter Jackson has stated that the script significantly changed between the 1996 and 2005 drafts. In Jackson's original 1996 draft of the script, Anne was the daughter of famed English archaeologist Lord Linwood Draw exploring ancient ruins in Sumatra. They would come into conflicts with Denham during his filming, and they would uncover a hidden Kong statue and the map of Skull Island. This would indicate that the island natives were a cult religion that once thrived on the mainland of Asia, and all trace of the cult was wiped out except for the few on the island. Instead of a playwright, Jack was an ex First World War fighter pilot, still struggling with the loss of his best friend, who is killed in battle during a worldwide prologue. Hap the cameraman was the only supporting character in the original draft who made it to the final version. Another difference was the Anne was actually caught in the V-Rex jaw in the Kong 3V-Rex fight. According to the draft, Anne was weighed in the mouth and slashed by the T. Peter Jackson decided early on that he did not want Kong to act human, and so they studied hours of gorilla footage. Andy Serkis, who modeled his movement, went to the London Zoo to watch the gorillas but was unsatisfied. He ended up going to Rwanda to observe mountain gorilla in the wild with a company called Rainbow Tours. The resulting Kong is entirely special effect, but he acts and moves very much like a real gorilla. Apart from Kong, Skull Island is also inhabited by dinosaurs and other large fauna. However, though they may look similar, they are not the familiar species. Inspired by the works of Dougal Jackson, the designers have imagined what 65 million years or more of isolated evolution would have done to the dinosaurs. The creatures can be said to be presented as more significantly accurate than those portrayed in the 1933 version. However, it can also be argued that they are less accurate to the paleontology of 2005 than the dinosaurs from the original were accurate to the paleontology of 1933. The names of these and hundreds of other beasts are found in the book The World of Kong, A Natural History of Skull Island. The film's budget climbed from an initial $150 million to a record-breaking $207 million, making it at one point the most expensive film yet made. Universal Studios only agrees to such an outlay after seeing a screening of the unfinished film, to which executives responded enthusiastically. In addition, it is estimated that marketing and promotion costs were more about $60 million. Production has difficulties such as Peter Jackson's decision to change composers from Howard Shore to James Newton Howard 7 weeks before the films opened. Also, the film was originally set to be 135 minutes but soon grew to 200, prompting Universal executive to fly to New Zealand to view a rough cut, but they liked it, so their concerns were addressed. The marketing campaign for King Kong started in full swing on June 27, 2005, when the teaser trailer made its debut first online at the official Volkswagen website at 8:45 p.m. Then 8:55 p.m. EST across media outlets owned by NBC Universal, the parent of Universal Studios, including NBC, Bravo, CNBC, and MCNBC. The trailer appeared in theaters attached to the War of the Worlds, which opened on June 29. Jackson also regularly published a series of production diaries which chronicled the making of the film. The diaries started shortly after the DVD release of The Return of the King as a way to give Jackson's The Lord of the Rings fans a glimpse of his next project. These diaries are edited into broadband friendly installments of 3 or 4 minutes each. They consist of features that would normally be seen in a making of documentary, a tour of a set, a roving camera introduction, key plates behind the scene, a peek inside the sound booth during last minute dubbing, or Andy Serkis doing his ape movements in a motion capture studio. The production diaries were released on DVD on December 13, 2005, one day before the US release of the film. This was one of the first occasions in which material that would normally be considered supplementary to the DVD release of a film was not only released separately but done so in a prestige format. The production diaries came packaged in a box with a set of prints and a replica 1930s era clipboard. It is also the first time such materials was published prior to the release of the film. A novelization of the movie and a prequel entitled The Island of the Skull was also written. A multi-platform video game entitled Peter Jackson's King Kong was released, which features an alternate ending. There was a hardback book entitled The World of Kong featuring artwork from Weta Workshop to describe the fictional bestiary in the film. A number of spin-offs from the remake franchise include books, novels, comics, and video games. With a take of $9.7 million offers on its opening day and an opening weekend of $50 million, King Kong did not meet expectations of Universal Studios executives. Some media outlets even considered the film to be a flop after its weak opening weekend, as at the point it was not on pace to make back its $207 million budget. Its opening weekend of $50 million, while good for most movies, fell short of the inflated expectations caused by the movie's enormous budget and marketing campaign. However, King Kong was able to hold its audience in the subsequent holiday weeks and ended up becoming a domestic hit, grossing $218 million at the North American box office, putting it the top 5 grossing films of 2005 domestically. King Kong fared much better in the international market as it grossed 332 million outside North America, leading to a worldwide total of $550 million, putting it the top 5 grossing films of 2005 worldwide. Other factors also affect the film's profitability besides box office sales, such as DVD sales. King Kong sold over $100 million worth of DVDs in the largest six-day performance in Universal Studios history. As of April 3, 2006, King Kong has sold more than $7.5 million DVDs, accumulating over $140 million worth of sales numbers domestically alone. As of June 25, 2006, King Kong has generated almost $38 million from DVD rental gross. Thus, despite the film's inauspicious start at the box office, King Kong turned out to be very profitable. Ticket and DVD sales combined, the film earned well over $700 million, becoming the fourth highest grossing movie in Universal Picture history. King Kong receives a favorable critical response, generating an 84% criticized fresh approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The most common criticism of the film were due to excessive length, lack of pace, overuse of slow motion, and some obvious use of CGI effects. Positive critical reviews regarded it as one of the few good epics and all-around best movies of 2005. Roger Ebert gave the movie 4 stars and listed it as the 8th best film of 2005. Similarly, King Kong has been included in many critics' top 10 of 2005 list. The film received 4 Academy Award nominations for visual effects, sound mixing, sound editing, and art direction, winning all but the last. Entertainment Weekly called the depiction of Kong the most convincing computer-generated character in the film in 2005. Some criticized the film for retaining critics' stereotypes present in the original film, though it was not suggested that Jackson had done his intentionally. Jack Black has claimed that he did not wear any makeup at all in the entire movie after hearing a false rumor that Clint Eastwood never wears any makeup in his movies. He also wore a hairpiece during filming rather than going through makeup to achieve the 30s hairdo look. King Kong 2005 movie box office collection, budget and unknown fact. It is directed by Peter Jackson, budget is $207 million, domestic box office collection $219 million, worldwide box office collection $563 million. Fifth highest grossing film of 2005. The Empire State Building shown in this film took about 18 months to make that building in computer graphics, while she was ready in 14 months in building real. The film had Andy Serkis as King Kong's motion capture, and Andy Serkis' 132 facial expressions were taken for the film so that those expressions can show in King Kong's face. In this film, the sound of King Kong's roar was made by lions roar backwards at half speed. And Serkis had to shoot 2 times for King Kong. One time had to shoot in King Kong's dress with Naomi Watts, and the rest of the star cast the second time in a motion capture suit. Jack Black had to wear a wig of this film because director Peter Jackson did not like his hairstyle. This film was the most expensive film in the United States at that time, after which the record of the film was broken by Superman Returns. This film was the second remake of the 1933 film King Kong. Before that, in 1976, first remake of King Kong had come. The King Kong film had sold $7.6 million DVDs till 2006. The film earned $100 million, or about 440 crore only from its DVDs. The Heart of a Big Gorilla. It was Beauty killed the Beast. There are astonished to behold in Peter Jackson's new King Kong, but one sequence relatively subdues hold the key to the movie's success. Kong has captured Ann Darrow and carried her to his perch high on the mountain. He puts her down not roughly and then begins to roar, bare his teeth and pound his chest. Anne, an unemployed vaudeville acrobat, somehow instinctively knows that the gorilla is not threatening her but trying to impress her by behaving as an alpha male, the king of the jungle. She does not know how Queen Kong would respond, but she does what she can. She does into her stage routine, doing backflips, dancing like Kaplan, jiggling 3 stones. Her instincts and empty cells are well. Kong's eyes widen in crusty wonder and faintly what may pass for delight. From then on, he thinks of himself as the girl's possessor and protector. She is like a teeny beautiful toy that he has been given for his very own, and before long, they are regarding the sunset together, both of them silenced by its majesty. The scene is crucial because it removes the element of creepiness in the gorilla guard relationship in the two earlier Kongs, 1933 and 1976, creating a water bond that allows her to trust him. When Jack Driscoll climbs the mountain to rescue her, he finds her comfortably nestled in Kong's big palm. Anne and Kong in this movie will be threatened by dinosaurs, man-eating worms, giant bats, loathsome insects, spiders, machine gun, and the army air corps, and could fall to their death into Cheshman, Skull Island, or from the Empire State Building. But Anne will be as safe as Kong can make her, and he will protect her even from her own species. The movie more or less faithfully follows the outlines of the original film, but his fundamental adjustment in this relationship between the beauty and the beast gives it heart. A quality the earlier film was lacking. Just Kong in 1933 courts for his captive, but she does not care so much for him. Kong was always misunderstood, but in the 2000 film, there is someone who knows it. As Kong ascends the skyscraper and screams not because of the gorilla but because of the attacks on the gorilla by a society that assumes he must be destroyed. The movie makes the same kind of shifts involving a giant gorilla that Spielberg Close Encounters of the Third Kind 1977 did when they replaced 1950 attacks on alien visitors with a very 1970 attempt to communicate with them. By 2005, Spielberg was back to attacking them in War of the Worlds. King Kong is a magnificent entertainment. It is like the flowering of all possibilities in the original classic film. Computers are used not merely to create special effects but also to create style and beauty. To find a look for the film that fits its story, and the characters are not cardboard heroes or villains seen in stark outline but quirky individuals with personalities. Consider the difference between Robert Armstrong (1933) and Jack Black as Carl Denham, the movie director who lands an unsuspecting crew on Skull Island. A Hollywood stereotype based on Cecil B. DeMille has been replaced by one who reminds us more of Orson Welles. And in the starring role of Ann Darrow, Naomi Watts expresses a range of emotions that Fay, bless her heart, was never allowed in 1933. Never have damsels been in more distress, but Fay mostly had to scream. While Watts looks into the gorilla's eyes and sees something beautiful there. There was a stir when Jackson informed the Home Office that this movie would run 187 minutes. The executive has something around 140 minutes in mind, so they could turn over the audience more quickly. Despite the greedy 20 minutes of paid commercials, audience now have inflicted upon them after they saw the movie, their objections were killed. Yes, the movie is a tad too long, and we could do without a few of the monsters and overturned elevated train, but it is so well done that we are complaining really only about too much of a good thing. This is one of the great modern epics. Jackson Frank's farm his Lord of the Rings trilogy wisely doesn't show the gorilla or the other creatures until more than an hour into the movie. In this, he follows Spielberg, who fought off producers who wanted the shark in Jaws to appear virtually in the opening titles. There is an hour of anticipation of low, ominous music, of subtle rumblings, of uneasy squints into the fog, and monotonous grumblings from the crew before the trap steamer arrives at Skull Island, or more accurately is thrown against its jagged rocks in the first of many scary action sequence. During that time, we see Depression era bloodlines and soap kitchen and meet the unemployed heroes of the film, Ann Darrow, whose Wetwell Theatre has closed and who is faced with debasing herself in Bursicue, Carol Denham, whose footage of a new movie is so unconvincing that the movie's booker want to sell it off as background footage. Jack Driscoll, a playwright whose dream lie off Broadway and who thrusts 15 pages of a first draft screenplay at Denham and tries to disappear. They all find themselves aboard the temper steamer of Captain Eaglehorn, who is persuaded to cast off just as Denham characters arrive on the dock in police cars. They set course for the South Seas, where Denham believes an uncharted island may hold the secret of a box office blockbuster. On board, Anne and Jack grow close but not too close because the movie's real story is between the girl and the gorilla. Once on Skull Island, the second act of the movie is mostly a series of hair curling special effects as overgrown, parahysteric creature endlessly pursues the human, occasionally killing or eating a sporting character. The bridges and logs our chest so important in 1933 are even better used here, especially when an assortment of humans and creatures fall in stages from a great height, resuming their deadly struggle whenever they can grab a convenient vine, rock, or tree. Two storylines are intercut: Anne and the ape, and everybody else and the other creatures. The third act returns to Manhattan, which looks uncannily evocative and atmospheric. It is not precisely realistic, but more of a dream city in which key elements swim in and out of the view. There's a poetic scene where Kong and the girl find a frozen pond in Central Park, and the gorilla is lost in delight as it slices on the ice. It's in scenes like this that Andy Serkis is most useful of the actor, who doesn't so much play Kong as embodying him. For the FX team, he adds the body language. Some of the monotone effects are not completely convincing, and earlier on Skull Island, it's strange how the fleeing human seems to run beneath the pounding feet of the T-Rexes without quite occupying the same space. But especially effects do not need to be convincing if they are effective, and Jackson trades a little realism of a lot of impact and momentum. The final ascent of the Empire State Building is magnificent, and for once, the gorilla seems the same size in every shot. Although Naomi Watts make a splendid heroine, there have been complaints that Jack Black and Adeline Brody are not precisely hero material, nor should they be. In my opinion, they are a director and a writer. They do not require big muscles and square jaws. What they require are strong personalities that can be transformed under stress. Denham, the director, clings desperately to his camera no matter what happens to him, and Driscoll, the writer, beats a strategic retreats before essentially rewriting his personal role in his own mind. Bruce Baxter is an actor who plays the movie's hero and now has to decide if he can play his role for real. And Preston is a production assistant who, as is often the case, would be a hero if anybody would give him a chance. The result is a surprisingly involving and rather beautiful movie, one that will appeal strongly to the primary action audience and also cross over to people who have no plans to see King Kong but will change their minds the more they hear. I think the film even have a message, and it is not that beauty killed the beast, it's that we feel threatened by beauty, especially when it overwhelms us, and we pay a terrible price when we try to deny its essential nature and turn it into a product or a target. This is one of the year's best film. When it's good, it's very good, but when it's not, it feels really long. Watching Peter Jackson's version of King Kong, it is apparently clear that the man feels as strongly about the original 1933 film as he did about Tolkien's Lord of the Rings book. One can really feel how earnestly he guided this film, paying homage to the original while expanding on it more than just a little bit. Unfortunately, the expansion is one of the problems with the movie, but I will get to that in a bit. I don't suppose I really need to go into the story itself, but there are a few changes from the additions to this version when compared to the 1933 film. Here, Ann Darrow, Naomi Watts is shown to be a stage performer at the outset of the film, basically doing vaudeville shows during the Great Depression in order to make a living. Time is spent up front showing the state of things in New York City in regards to the struggle to survive in that devastating economic downturn to great effect. We meet her co-performers, a tight-knit little family including an elderly gentleman who passes for a father figure for her, and we get to know at least Anne and is gentleman well enough in the few early minutes of the film to really feel for them when the theater where they perform is unceremoniously closed down. Cut to Carol Denham, played by an unusually subdued Jack Blake in a meeting with money men trying to pitch his movie in progress and get more money to go shoot on locations at the mysterious island indicated on a map which has just came into his possession. He is portrayed as a man with a vision throwing his cinematic perils before Moonlight but ignorance swine. The financiers have already sunk $40,000 into his picture, big bucks back then, and decided to cut their losses and sell off what Jack has filmed so far as stock footage. Jack overhears this and decided to take up with the existing rolls of film plus all the camera equipment to make the movie anyway, despite the loss of his leading actresses and all financing. In a manner very similar to the original film, he finds Anne, although here it takes a bit more convincing to talk her into joining him. There's a funny throwaway line in there, but about his being trustworthy because he is a movie producer. He talks his way onto the ship despite the captain not trusting him and also wrangle playwright Jack Driscoll into coming along in order to finish the only partially done screenplay. It turns out that the only reason Anne decided to come along was because Driscoll was writing the film and she was a big fan of his plays. So, one major difference is that instead of a lowly sailor, Driscoll is a well known and sophisticated playwright. We are also introduced to Hayes, Ivan Park, who seems to play a role closer to that of the original Driscoll, and Jimmy as a young farmer stowaway out to prove himself. Finally, we find ourselves out to sea and on the way to the island. It took a very long time to get to this point, and we also spend what seems to be an inordinate amount of time getting to Skull Island. Peter Jackson took a while developing the relationship between Jack and Anne in order to make it more real for the audience. The problem is that a lot of that effort went to support nothing more than Jack's determination to not leave Anne behind. The real relationship is this movie is between Anne and Kong. Some of you viewing this don't even go there. Fortunately, while a lot of time is spent showing the development of the Kong and relationship, it is times well spent. Andy Serkis, the actor whose expressions movement is behind the CGI Kong, did a phenomenal job, as did the animators, of making Kong real. Much like the original filmmakers, the idea here was that the more fearsome Kong was at the beginning of the film, the more we would feel upon his death. King Kong and Naomi Watts really stole the show here, no questions. The time spent on screen showing the both of them was a joy to watch. The process of the relationship changing from fear and curiosity to genuine caring and concerns was completely believable. However, when the action shifted to the rest of the crew, things did start to drag. Although the fix was spectacular, there did come time where I found myself thinking, is not this scene over yet? With a remake of such an iconic film, one cannot help but make comparisons, and many times throughout the film, I ask myself why this one took 3 hours to tell the same story the original did so effectively in half that time. Strangely, the one character that I thought was going to be closest to the original was Carl Denham, and he really was not. I actually would have preferred to see Jack Black tap into some of his over the top energy to portray Denham more like the barely suppressed curvular backer that Robert Armstrong played in 1933. Jack just never worked for me, but not for the reasons I had expected going in. I think it was more due to Peter Jackson's take on the character than the acting itself. This Denham was more human just, but he did not strike me as the kind of man that would have the sheer force of will required to bring back the great King Kong. Towards the end of the film, the scene where Kong is introduced to the paying audience was quite well done and effective. Right through to where he escapes his bonds and rampage in Times Square, there is a new sequence in this film showing how Kong calms down once he finds Anne, and how they go off the reconnect like old friends until their peace is shattered by the military coming after Kong. Of course, they eventually end up at the top of the Empire State Building, but here again things seems to go on longer than they need to just for the sake of the more screen time with Kong and special effect. When it does come down to the end and Jackson focuses in once more on the character, it does all come together once more. Expect for more things. The weekly delivered it was beauty. Done Kill the Beast by Jack Black and the final scene between Kong and Naomi Watts, which looked like it was lifted straight from the end of the Titanic. CGI effects, especially for Kong, were flawless. I did not for a second think I was looking at a CGI creation. The scene on the island with the natives might be too intense for the 7 and under crowd. Some of them looking really creepy and in extreme close-ups that even creeped me out a bit. All in all, a really good movie that could have been a great movie if it had 30 minutes or so trimmed from it. Of course, the DVD version will probably be 4 hours long and will no doubt suffer for it. King Kong 2005 T was Beauty Killed the Beast, says Carol Denham. Fiction movie within a movie director. What a piece of work is man. How noble is reason. How infinite in faculties in form and moving. How express and admirable in action. How like an angel in apprehension. How like a god. The beauty of the word, the paragon of animals. Hamlet Act scene. You almost believed him in 2005. Oh no, actually, what is fair makes the comedy stream shoot for 1 year. The mad and magnificent brilliance of one of cinema's most extraordinary images, the giant ape last stand atop the Empire State Building proclaiming doomed counter-evolutionary defenses, is thrilling revived in Peter Jackson's passionate remake of the 1933 classic by Cooper and Serkis. His Kong is noble, savage, anarchic beast, wondered kid, and unloosed it. Alpha male heroes don't get alphier than this, and like its mighty hairy lead, Jackson's film in big. Very bit covered 3 hours is almost twice as long as the original, telling the long and involved story of how Carl Denham, played by Jack Black, an adventure travelogue filmmaker modeled on Brian Cooper himself, journeys to the far-off Skull Island with author Jack Driscoll and winsome leading lady Ann Darrow. There he finds a nest of dinosaurs and savage like something from Conan Doyle or Kipling chances upon the enormous ape and in a movement of mad hobbies decides to bring it back to the big city of profit. Kong himself is CGI modeled by Andy Serkis. It has to be admitted that the humans' performances are a little abroad and there are some lunges and moments when the narrative's tendons and muscles go a little slack, especially at the very beginning, but you need these sketches of relative inaction to clear a space around that gum mapping final scene. To give it due weight and focus, and indeed to clear a space around the 25-foot gorilla himself. He is a heartbreaking and even tragic figure, his only companion, a diminutive blonde who can never return his love and no more to whom he could shout that he is top of the world. This new Kong is a fully de-grammed with real grandeur in its power, its spectacle and its spine-tanglingly beautiful version of 1930 New York. It is the thing of wonder. It certainly equals and even exceeds anything Jackson did in Lord of the Rings. I admit that when I hear that Jackson proposed to revive the original in its Depression period setting, I thought it is a failure of Nev. The first Kong was set in 1933 but made in 1933. It was fiercely contemporary was the idea of a modern destructive force and adding monotonous building in 2005 too comfortable for obvious reasons, especially considering that the very substandard 1976 remake had the app shining up the Twin Towers. Maybe, and yet Jackson brings such brio, such crystalline perfection to every detail of his 1930 city that the proper reaction is not to cavil but to swoon. The other imperative option which Jackson has coolly chosen not to wake up is making his heroine Ann Darrow an actual explicit relationship of Clarence Darrow, the famous lawyer who orged the Darwinian case in the monkey trial 8 years earlier in 1925, within America's living memory. The coincidence is often noted, and the story of King Kong has a wildly strategical yet ambiguous relationship to this still current debate. And seeking to wrest Kong from his habitat, Denham might be exhibiting the satirist transgression, but King Kong is close enough to Homo sapiens to fall mergonically in love with a low-born human, yet his tragedy is Anne can never be his queen. When Denham thinks he can capture and humiliate his Uber app and assert the primacy of humanity over this mighty ancestor, he may also exhibiting the creationist vanity. Everything the 1933 movie has, Jackson has to the power of 100. The appearance of dinosaur as well as a giant ape may look excessive. Yet the point is that Kong, the old Sufi, has to rescue Anne from those predator, and Jackson's bring out his semen gallantry far more clearly in this version. He also gleefully restores the famously cut spider pit sequence, and his skin crawlingly horrible creations will make Archer promise of us all. There's a no cage strong enough for the sheer broad strength of Jackson's movie, a muscularity matched by his ingenious love for the great beast himself. Like this teeny blonde worshipper, you will be in palm of his hand. King Kong 2005, when Peter Jackson somewhat shockingly used his brand new Best Actor Oscar and all the accumulated clout from having forced the three massive hit films of the Lord of the Rings trilogy into existence to get Universal to sign off on a new iteration of the 1933 masterpiece King Kong. It was no less than the sixth legally sectioned sequel, remake, sequel to a remake, or spin off of Marion C. Cooper's magnum opus to have seen the light of the day. And I do dare say that Jackson's 2005 King Kong is pretty much objectively the very best of those six titles, thought that almost entirely speaks to the profoundly low quality of the other five. The fluff-headed 1933 Son of Kong Toho pairs of 1960 Dakujo starring rather crummy gorilla suits as the famed eighth wonder of the world King Kong vs Gorilla, and King Kong escapes producer Dino De Laurentiis' awful 1976 King Kong, and its even worse 1986 sequel King Kong Lives. None of these establish a bar that any halfway competent movie should have a very difficult time clearing. Particularly compared to the De Laurentiis King Kong, the most apparent comparison point for Jackson's film may be even more than the 1933 original. The standard for success could barely be any lower. So that would be step one. Congratulations to Jackson and co for not absolutely sucking. That's a bit snide of me really, because we all slanders are firing. The 05 Kong does a whole great deal more than to simply not suck. I will not go so far as to say that I think it challenged the quality of original film in any specific way. Thought it very best it comes a hell of a lot closer than I think anybody would have been seen to expect in the run up to the film's widely tempered Christmas times debate. That is, mind you, when all cylinders are firing as they are very frequently not. Here's the most basic fact about the 05 Kong. One that I largely saw fit to overlook when I was first blown away by the spectacle of the movie in theaters and has its grounds to loathe like an edgy tag that you cannot get out of your shirt. This Kong Kong somehow is 187 minutes long or 201 minutes long if you like, because why the hell would not Jackson release an extended cut on DVD? And with as far beyond the realm of basic tendency as so much of the film already ran, even the good parts are too long. The 14 additional minutes don't even register really when all is said and done. King Kong is all version is about a giant gorilla who gets pissed off when you throw some planes in his face. It can be a great cinema, but it's really not high art and treating it like a ultra serious character study, as Jackson and his co-writers Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyce most definitely do, and a history lesson on the dollar of the Great Depression as they do is non-committal half-hearted way that peters out after some 25 minutes is at least strange, not necessarily the wrong thing to do, but strange, and it certainly does drift into wrongness when one does as Jackson and C2 and make the basic of the entire first hours of the movie. So the outline is about 85% similar to the original King Kong with the emphasis rearranged. Now the first person we meet is Ann Darrow, played by Naomi Watts. Our 2-bit vaudevillian is a shitty theater in New York. Actually, even before we meet her, the film very carefully introduces us to 1933, a world of art, Deco skyscraper and Town, and not too much in between via a sardonic mood takes set to E.R. Johnson sitting on top of the world. No wait, actually, it starts with a brief fake montage of monkeys in Central Park Zoo. The point being King Kong needs to take a moment to settle down and finds its footing narratively and thematically, and Tony, which is apparently something you are able to get away with when you have 3 hours and change to faff about with it. But it is a little annoying the way the movie keeps trying things out and giving up on them. Not that I'd want the smug glitches angle of marrying a peppy song to scene of skulls to end up actually defining the tone of a Kong movie, but it ends adult opening, and even more so when we factor in the glossy Andrew Lancy cinematography, adding a slick sheen that aesthetises the on-screen poverty as though it took place just across the mountains from Riverdale or Rohan, working entirely against the ironic flair of Jimmy Selker's editing. Regardless, we have a failed vaudevillain. Then over here we have filmmaker Carl Denham, Darcy Misker, a baby-faced conman hacker, and Bradley Showman, who is finding the fate for documentaries of exquisite safari footage barely strung together with a human narrative as much run its course, and that the money men will not put up with this bullshit anymore. But he's got a mysterious map burning a hole in his pocket and enough for a crew setup that he is ready to set off that very night to stay ahead of the law and his debts. The only thing he lacks is a leading lady, so with the sharp instincts of an exploration whiz-kid, he heads to the nearest strips club, hoping to find someone skinny enough to fit into his costume and eager to do anything more dignified, even its scalp across the Atlantic and Indiana Ocean on a trap steamer. And naturally enough, what failed for a villain should have just arrived at the same strip club having been given the address with the promise she can get a paying job. So, those are two birds of our protagonist. The last thing is also the reason the Duchess and signs on for Carol's figure tale of adventure. As long as she's been trying to get on stage, her dream has been to work with the great social realistic playwright Jack Driscoll, and would not you would just love to guess who Carol has lined up to write his movie. Even better for Anne, Carol has managed to trap Jack on the very same trap streamer, which means they are all in for a few weeks of tight quarters, during which time, of course, Anne and Jack fall in love. For King Kong 33 and even King Kong 76, whose three were pretty much all the characters needed, just give the rest of the cast names and that's enough to get the job done. For Jackson, Wash, and Beyonds, that was not nearly sufficient. These people were in the business of making epics, gosh damn it, and so we get a substantially fleshed out ensemble on board the tramp steamer Venture under the command of Captain Eaglehorn, first mate Hayes, and soul white child turned heart of darkness reading cabin boy, and creamy Kumpilanki, and the comic Chinese deckhand Joy. Not to be outdone, Carol has his own team: boyish assistant Preston, and crusty old cameraman Herb, and sound cordist Mike, and preening Manty star Bruce Mixer. Carl names for this picture. That's a lot of people, and we spend time with pretty much of all of them. Poor soundman Mike least of all, for which outside he is the first to die. Absolutely none of it proves to be time well spent. This is still the story of how a giant ape falls into something a lot like love with a pretty blonde woman, and trouble to his death of a New York skyscraper is pursuit of that love. It still only actually needs Anne, Jack, and Carol to have any sort of definitions as character. As for the rest, God knows. Especially God knows why Jimmy gets so much attention given how little he ends up doing for the movie. He disappears entirely after the action shifts from Skull Island back to Manhattan and is softly just background noise on Skull Island itself. Incidentally, the film is the first time that the name Skull Island has been explicitly attached to Kong's home. The whole call is nothing but deadwood, and they are deadwood for a very long time. It's not till around 50 minutes that the film even arrives at Skull Island, and another 20 minutes later that Kong finally shows up. And that opening third is absolute present dull, is very weird and entirely disappreciate to anything that any King Kong movie has ever or could ever be about. Even in 2005, it was already clear from The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King that Jackson and his team were more than capable of developing an unhealthy attachment to their own footage, but King Kong resembled that the film less than Jackson's features tab The Hobbit as an epic trilogy that takes longer to watch than the book does to read. That it is not so much that you feel like the filmmaker had so much content that they could not make the hard choices, but slimming it down as that they decided in advance that they wanted to make a big scale epic and edit shit until it was long enough. It's a pity that King Kong is such a miserable slog to start off, because the second that it arrives on Skull Island, it suddenly explodes into life. Its plane was part of the film had captured Jackson's attention for all those years and drove him to make the thing in the first place. It also planned that, as been clear in pretty much every movie Jackson has ever directed, he is a horror filmmaker at heart, and everything else he does is an extension of that. The ancient ruins of the Skull Island civilization, which are a dead ranger of Osligath in The Lord of the Rings, the Two Tower are poor Lovecraft, and the Skull Islander themselves are staged and conceived as something out of Italian zombie and cannibal cinema, which make this in some way the most objectionable depiction of the natives in any version of the story, and in some ways the least, since they are so clearly not supposed to be taken as analogues to the real world. Once inside the Skill Island jungle, the design team gets to go to town on creating a wild menagerie of discussing creepy trolleys and big savage dinosaurs that nest here. There are many reasons why directors attempt remakes, but I have one cause it's my favorite movie ever. Should not really rank as the most encouraging. Spielberg sensed contemporary relevance in this update of the World of the Words. Spielberg saw vast rooms for improvement with Ocean's 11 and numerous other have quite simple throw a new take on an old story would grant his big bucks. No doubt Universal had the latter in mind when finally greenlight his latest reworking of the 1933 monster classic, but as it is well documented, that was not the key driving impulse. No, Peter Jackson just wanted to accumulate the film that lit his first fires of inspiration and repay that creative inclination with a fitting tribute. Pre Lord of the Rings, this sounded like poor Julie, especially as the Last King John Gulliver's 76 monstrosity was such a flop. No wonder Jackson struggled to get it rolling in 96 regardless of the fact that remakes of Godzilla and Mighty Joe Young were already crowding out the masterpiece. Of course, after Rings, Jackson could have suggested remaking Plan 9 from outer space and been showered with greenbacks still would not have made it a great idea. Yet his wanting to remake Kong, even if cinema quite frankly doesn't need another Kong, turns out to be this movie great at strength. Like Sammy Remy, Jackson is a filmmaker who lets his inner fanboy guide his rather than blind him. Indeed, Jackson's infinity is so tangible in his insertion of winking in jokes, and his choreography of the action sequence, and most importantly, in his details realization of the great battle scared ape himself, it allows us to easily forgive the few flaws the movie does have, such as, well, why, for example, spend so long in the first acts detailing middle rung characters like Vigor, Crewman Jimmy, Jimmy Bell, and Captain Eaglehorn, if you are just going to drop them out of the story come the climatic New York rampage. It seems an odd choice to pair the script in such area, pushing our arrival at Skull Island back to the end of the first hours, then keep it lean in another. And on the technical side, the occasional CG shot looks unfinished and ambitious. Brontor's Stampede, for instance, doesn't quite gel its madly scrambled human element with its Dino participants to form a believable whole. Fortunately, Jackson spent so much time knocking our socks off that you will not really feel like scratching your head. Besides, there's a level of criticism you just cannot go to unless you want to start questioning Anne's Wolverine like ability to resist skeletal thrusters while accepting the existence of a 25-foot tall gorilla. His horror sensibility serves the story well, so does his dark sense of humor. Watch Denham mourn his ruined collide like his companions mourning his dead friends. He also teases fine performances out of his ensembles, Jack Black deserving a special mention for making Denham so appealingly reprehensible. The overlong Skull Island section, meanwhile, might be an indulgent action bring, but it's still out. Spielberg at his most Jurassic, icy giant bugs execute schoolgirl sequence while Kong's T-Rex tussle causes fanboy to shriek with delight. Even the monster-free seconds will cause mandibles to Selkin, such as the Venture's attempt to navigate the island's rock spike coast, or the Kong's morning ritual disturbingly portrayed as an ascetic religious experience for the island-wrenched hissing natives. As for the king himself, if he doesn't win the film at the special effect Oscar in a few months, Empire will be a monkey's uncle. In fact, if the Academy were not so damn conservative, he'd be in with a fighting chance of earning Andy Serkis, who provided the motion capture moves and acting gone to Kong represent the next evolutionary step up from Gollum in Vata's peerless splicing of performance and VFX. While the biplan sweating and skyscraper clambering undoubtedly impresses, it's the his official performance as attraction with Anne Wars in a knockout turn that he truly astonishes, not least because at all times he remains valiantly unauthorized and yet still invites sufficient emotional involvement for you to become the Empire State Showdown. It's as a romance that the Zero 05 King Kong outdoes the original hands down with some wonderful interludes torturing the couple's bond to such a degree that its ultimate snapping is painful. King Kong 2005 review. In some ways, it seems kind of strange to me that Peter Jackson's King Kong was hotly anticipated as it was. I mean, where I came from, a lot of well meaning folks can't remember the difference between Kong and Godzilla without taking a moment to think about it. And we'll all remember what happened when Hollywood adopted to remake Godzilla back in 1998. A remake of King Kong not only has it been done before badly in 1976, but the original is an undisputed cinema classic. The magic name is all of this is obviously Peter Jackson, and that makes all the differences for his closely watched and highly anticipated follow-up to his Lord of the Rings masterwork. Jackson chose to remake that he commonly refers to as his favorite film, and the one movie that he claims truly made him want to be a filmmaker. That's another thing that's a sort of strange. What kind of filmmaker step out to remake his favorite movie? Is not that it's some way like admitting your own superiority to it? Would you cuddly and fun Peter Jackson think that way whenever his motivation for doing this film? We can be thankful his take on King Kong is a top-tier entertainment achievement of the highest level. Not only does it operate as a very specific love letter to the original 1933 film, which some have called the Star Wars of its day, it effectively builds upon it not only in the term of special effect but also in terms of characterization and storytelling. It is the theatrical must-see movie of the year, hands down. I admit that I am not someone who's been waiting for the with bated breath, although I grow to love the Lord of the Rings series. I really miss the Peter Jackson of the Frightened and earlier. In all honesty, when the rest of the world jumped on the Jackson bandwagon, most of them still obvious to his early work. Oh, the temptations to recommend bad taste, it felt a bit annoyed at the whole thing. So, while still wishing the man best of luck, I sat back, arm crossed, demanding that this King Kong movie of his, who has been trying to get made since before Lord of the Ring, prove itself. I need not have worried. The film star may be big and stinky, but the film is most entirely not, and I don't mean Jack Black. It sounds ridiculous, but story in some ways amounts to a love triangle between Naomi Watts, Ann Darrow, Kong, and Adrian Brody's Jack Driscoll. If I were her, I'd be stuck to, considering that I have not been a fan of Brody since his big-headed Oscar kick. But fear not, King Kong is not the pro-bestiality film the Hollywood thinks the entire world has been waiting for. Amid the adventure and excitement, there are some bigger themes to consider, including those of obsession, optimism, and mankind's uncomfortably close proximity to the animal's world when it comes to primal behavior. Plot-wise, this version sticks very closely to the original. For those who are unfamiliar with that film, stop being such losers and get the DVD ASAP. Familiarity with that film is not required to greatly enjoy this new one, but it does bring a significant additional layer of reward to the proceedings. Homage abundance as dialogue, costumes, and even scenes from the original lovingly turned up. One could almost assume that the 1933 directors Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Shavdik would be proud of this remake if not for its revisions of Black Carol Denham, obviously based upon Cooper in the original. As the filmmaking Husker Weasel that he is in his respect, I have to give it to the remake. As great as the Copper Shorter classic is, it is the best cards around the issue of who is at fault for all the chaos and death, even if it is literally the filmmaker themselves in aerial chemos who scaps Kong to his fate. The story, if you don't already know it, begins in Depression era New York City as desperate filmmaker Denham happens upon out of work actresses Darrow on the brink of the journey of the ships he is carted for a far off mysterious destinations. They are headed for the last undiscovered spot on the map, which is in Denham's mind the ultimate film location. It is a dark lost world, forgotten by time and home to some of the most deadly inhabitants ever known to man. At about the 1 hour's mark of this 3 hour epic, Kong makes his memorable debut, making off into the hostile jungle with the beautiful Anne and given chase by both the ships and Denham's entire crews. Parallel encounter mostly involves dinosaurs, almost all of them fresh to the screen, as to both successfully avoid Jurassic Park comparisons and envelop viewers in an all-consuming fantasy world. That same familiar but not quite real-life quality is then applied to Jackson's Wonders, a versioning of 1930 New York City, where the ant is truly hopped to giant ape proportion along the way and eventually becomes enamored with her capture, seeing the wounded soul of his savage beast. Profoundly realized for the screen by Vita Workshop and actor Andy Colum Serkis, viewer will feel more sympathy for this digital creation than for most flesh and blood characters in other films. Naomi Watt is perfectly cast and Ann Darrow, leaving no mystery as to why not only Kong falls for her, but why everyone else risks their lives to get her back. Brody, I must say, is competent as Jack Driscoll. Reimagine here as a frustrated playwright, Jack Black, and eventually gives very brief glimpses of being in over his head in this big budget extra vengeance as he is saddled with the most copper Soundcake dialogue, bit dated and cheesy but also too classic to not include. But in the end, he gets the job done. James Newton Howard turns in a rousing adventure score worthy of following the Max Teen core that preceded over 70 years ago, and is still fondly remembered as one of the greatest musical score of all time. Jackson's script, co-written by his usual collaborators Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyers, and direction proved that Lord of the Rings was no fluke if anyone were to actually think that, and cements his place as the event filmmaker and storyteller of our time. I suppose the $1 million question is, does Peter Jackson's King Kong actually manage to surpass the original classic? It's not one that many films buff would dark ask for fear of having to possibly grant superiority to a remake, always an ugly word in this case without even the test of time and struggle to come up with another example of a modern imagining that has just its classic source material. Invention of the Body Snatchers comes close but even closer in the comic book series Ultimate Spider-Man, which first 6 issues were masterfully spent fleshing out and modernizing the Wall Crawl's origin. Fast told over 40 years ago in a mere 11 pages, could any comic fan ever bring himself to say that Ultimate Spider-Man tops the Stanley Steve Ditko original? No, that could be like sacrilege, but at the same time it undoubtedly builds upon it in a way that only inches the story exactly the same in true of the Kong films. The brilliance of the original cannot be denied, but the beauty of this remake is how it actually honors its source by building upon it in a poor and viable way. Some may say that King Kong has a long first hour and it is all character development and exposition, but I say it doesn't hurt the movie since it is entertaining all the while, and if not, and boredom will be immediately forgotten once the action begins anyway. Curtain moments will be too intense for sensitive children, but the passion of the Kong ending will bring out the gushing sensitivity in everyone. Peter Jackson's film work has many things: action, adventure, horror, comedy, romance, and tragedy. But above and beyond all of that, King Kong is spectacle. Fire the biggest bells and whistle cinema in your neck of the woods, stand in lines for as long as it takes, and then enjoy every minute of it. Because, like all true cinematic marvel, the DVD experience will merely be a reasonable false mate at best, and since it's universal, it would probably be a buggy DVD 18 anyhow. So enjoy this on the big screen while you can. This is one film event that earned its anticipation. Behold Kong, the eighth wonder of the world, well, ninth wonder if you count the 33 version separately. King Kong 2005, directed by Peter Jackson. 15 years ago, Peter Jackson followed up his Lord of the Rings trilogy with a passion project that had been on his mind since the late 80s. A 3 hours, 3.5 if you have watched the extended edition long King Kong movie at the time. It was a polarizing entry. Moviegoers were not super happy about the film, but critics seems to like it. Over the years, however, King Kong has grown a reputation for being everything wrong with Jackson's work: too long, overstuffed, and filled to the brim with VFX. Does that statement still hold water, or has the movie actually aged well? Let's start off with the good. The cast, everybody, yes, Jack Black included, bring their A game here. Naomi Watts incredible as Ann Darrow, perfectly escalating the feelings of young hope and desire with the dread of maybe being forced to do something in order to eat. Adrien Brody is also phenomenal, but the real standouts are Jamie Bell and Yvonne Parker as Jimmy and Heise. Their relationship, despite not being not the main focal point, is still interesting and downright gut-wrenching at times. Everyone from the main cast to supporting cast does a great job, but who really shines is Andy Serkis as the Kong. This was his second motion capture character post Gollum and the first time playing an ape, and Serkis gives easily the best performance depicting Kong's animalistic rage while subtly conveying a wide array of emotion. He never says a single word, but you know exactly how the character feels. Since this is a Peter Jackson movie, you have to expect the visuals to be good, and they still hold up after 15 years. Yes, there are shoots that look wide and fake, but those are few and far between. What I have noticed about Jackson Vata Company over the years is that their VFX work is virtually unparalleled. Kong looks great as he really looks and feels like a 50-foot tall gorilla, as do the dinosaurs, bugs, water, and even New York City, all worthy of the film's Oscar win. The scene at the bottom of the cliff with all the bug monsters is still incredible to watch. And then there's the music. James Newton Howard's score is nothing short of beautiful, and no joke, it's probably the second best thing about this movie. The first being the Dinosaurs 5. Each place and situation has its own unique score that fits so well. Knowing now that Howard Shore, the composer for Lord of the Ring, had an entire score made and then scraps, really makes me wonder what we could have had. However, I have to put aside my fanboy arcs and address King Kong's biggest problem: its length. If directors were chief, then a Peter Jackson entry in 10 10 chickens, 5 pounds of mashed potatoes, a liter of gravy, 7 medium rare steaks, 4 gallons of cider, a pound of cream cannon, and a roasted wild boar for the final course. All this, and they don't even give you a break between course to talk with you dinner guest. And what I'm trying to say that Jackson gives you so much with each movie he makes. I have no problem with this as I am always angry, but other moviegoers would have just preferred something simple, and that was wrong here. I don't think Jackson knew what to cut out of the King Kong, but it didn't need to be 3.5 hours long. There are a lot of needlessly Comfortable scenes like the army sergeants giving his boy a pep talk about they have crushed by a giant ape and mistaking a sound guy for Jack for 2 minutes, or Kyle Sanders looking at himself in the mirror with a calm mustache. These might make for good moments on paper, but they don't belong in a King Kong movie. If you are curious so how long it takes for Kong to reach the Empire State Building, the theoretical edition takes 2 hours and 45 minutes while the extended edition is almost 3 hours. I might love long movies, but that is too long to get to the high points of freaking King Kong. My dad said that he loves Peter Jackson as much as I do, but he hates the fact that he filled the arc to check his watch multiple times throughout this movie. He even addresses something profound about the remake. What's the takeaway here? What's the point of this King Kong when it's already been made to death? And he has a point. This is a 90-minute story stuck in a 3.5-hour movie. Narratively, it's unchanged from the 1930 film, but with the exception of the visual effects and extended runtime, there's nothing new added to the King Kong mythos. Ultimately, this is a very straightforward remake. If you know the bare minimum about King Kong, then you will know exactly what will happen in this movie. There are surprises, but nothing that you have not already seen. King Kong is not a bad film and can be great at times. If you have the time, you should watch it. There's a great acting, great action, awesome music, and despite the length issue, the story is well told. Even the characters feel unique in their own right and make you seem invested in their story. Even Lumpy, a background character with little screen time, has an arc that is very well told. Unfortunately, if you hate long movies, this simply will not be for you. There's just too much needless filler and you will get bored if this is not your thing. Still, if you love Peter Jackson's Give King Kong a watch, it's definitely more unique than other action movies these days. King Kong 2005. I wrote this review in 2006 and at the now defended my opinion of the film has soared considerably since the somewhat overly genius review. Well, I never get around seeing it in the theater, but thanks to the magic of DVD, I finally watched Peter Jackson 2005 remake of King Kong. If you're curious about my reaction to it, keep watching. If not, so there are spoilers ahead, even if you are well familiar with the original film since Jackson's versions differ in several ways. The story is a nutshell. Flamboyant movie producer Carl Denham charters a merchant ship to take him and his leading lady, Ann Darrow, in search of the legendary Skull Island, where he hopes to capture such wonders on film that audience will line up around the block to pay admission. But instead, he ends up capturing a fearsome 25-foot tall gorilla named Kong, who has left the safety of his jungle lair to pursue Miss Darrow, with whom he has become helplessly smitten, and then transports him back to New York to put him on display and make millions of dollars. Kong speaks, of course, and wreaks havoc in downtown New York City before recapturing Ann Darrow and climbing to the top of the Empire State Building, where he is picked off by machine gunners in B planes. The original 1933 version of the story by producer Ryan C. Cooper and director Ernest P. Shorrock is an undisputed classic. OB maybe it's disputed by some who now regard it as a creaky old black and white board with grumpy special effects. I feel that these people are missing out on one of the greatest cinematic experiences of all time, a marvel of compact storytelling, pacing, and bravura filmmaking with a wonderful cast and groundbreaking special effects by master craftsman Wallace O'Brien that are still astounding. How does Jackson feel compared to the original? First of all, it looks absolutely beautiful. The first and last parts of the movie display a dazzling reactions of Depression's era New York City that is rich in details and utterly convincing. Jackson spent a lot more time here than Cooper and Sodiq, who were more interested in setting up the story and getting us on our way to Skull Island as quickly as possible. In fact, Jackson spends a lot more time on everything in this version, making it twice as long as the original. This time we get Ann Darrow's radiant Naomi Watts' backstory in more details. She is a struggling Wendell whose show just closed down, forcing us to consider the horrors of performing in Barsecu rather than starving before her fateful meeting with Carl Denham, who in this version is a much more devious and manipulative, almost villainous character. Jack Black somehow managed to make him mostly likable anyway. Anne accepts Denham's offer of money, adventure, and fame, the thrill of a lifetime, and a long sea voyage after finding that a playwright she greatly admires. Adam Bart's Jack Driscoll, who was the ship's first mate in the original version, is writing the screenplay to Denham's picture, so off they go one step ahead of the police who have a warrant for Denham's arrest for bilking his previous film's investors. The journey to Skull Island gives Jackson a chance to introduce us to still more characters, subplot etc., such as the close relationship between the first mate and a youngster named Jimmy, whom he once found stored away in the cargo hold. This does not really go anywhere except for the fact that Jimmy is reading Joseph Connor's Heart of Darkness and it's supposed to tie in with everything somehow. I never read Heart of Darkness, but I know Apocalypse Now was based on it, so I guess Kong is Colonel Kurtz. Come to think of it, the latter Marnell Bonner would have made a pretty good Kong. Anyway, Anne and Jack sort of fall in love. Denham and Captain Eaglehorn clash, much despised Denham in the version. The self-absorbed actor hired as Denham's leading man, Bronze actor hired as Denham's leading man, admires himself in the mirror, and when they finally get to Skull Island, there's a thrilling sequence in which the ship is almost dashed against the rocks. The island natives are a much more basic and murderous bunch this time, leading to some truly creepy moments. And when they kidnap Anne and offer her as a sacrifice to Kong by tying her to one end of a rickety stone bridge and then lowering it across a deep chasm on the jungle side of the Great Wall, which separates them from the rest of the island. Jackson's staging and execution of the scenes are impressive, all of which leads up to the big moment, Kong's entrance, which somehow just doesn't have the impact of the original. We only get to see fog surrounded glimpses of him at first and a close up his eyes, but never one definitive reveal, which I found disappointing. Kong snatches Anne from her bonds, somehow managing not to rip her arm off in the process, and heads off into the jungle with her. This leads to a protracted series of fierce battles as Kong protects his golden hired prize from a succession of prehistoric foes such as T-Rexes, three this time instead of the previous one, and giant bat-like creature that infest the cave inside this mountaintop layer. Meanwhile, Driscoll, Denham, and a group of sailors who have set out to rescue and end up running for their lives from a horde of stamping brown terriers who are running from a group of hungry raptor-like creatures. This scene becomes almost cartoonish as the men scamper between the stooping brontosaurus feet and the huge breast finally begin to pile up in a scene that resembles, as one message boarded poster put it, the police car pile up at the end of the Blues Brothers. As if that were not enough, their attempt to cross a gorge via a fallen log, which parallels the famous scene from the original, is foiled as an angry Kong shows up and starts to shake them off the log and into the pit below. Here, Jackson makes up for the excision of the fabler spider pit sequence from the 33 version by having the helpless sailors attacked by the most nightmarish collection of giant insect spiders, lychee, etc., that he and his SPFX crew would conceive of. I am wondering how many walkouts there were When this was in theater, it's pretty horrifying, but it also pretty cool. Jack survives the pit of course and goes it along as he makes his way up to Kong's lair. What he and the wrecked remains of the rescue team don't know, however, is that while they were going through hell trying to rescue Anne, she was falling in love with Kong, as this is the element of Jackson's remake that I was studying the most since advanced word on the movie began to hit at all, and which served as a giant stumbling block in my enjoyment of the film as a whole. I thought it was a damn bad idea when it was injected into the stupendously awful 1976 remake, and I still do. Let's face it, if a giant rampaging gorilla grabbed me and carried off into a jungle filled with parasitic monsters, I'd be screaming my head off in mortal terror non-stop, just like Faye Warren and Darrow did anytime Kong came near her. I would not be teaching the big hairy pace luggage nestling in his lap to watch the sunset or making soulful goggly eyes at him. I like the part where Anne attempts to calm the priest down by performing her worthwhile routine for him and eliciting a delighted reaction, but I just cannot accept seeing the film turned into a love story that could almost pass for a Harlequin romance novel with Kong taking Fabrice's place on the cover. At this point in the movie, it's almost as though Jackson had decided to remake Tarzan the Ape Man instead of King Kong, but when Tarzan cried off the jungle and she eventually came to love the untamed wildman, it was romantic. Here it's just wide, and I found myself wondering at times if Anne was not a bit off in the head. And when Jack finally shows up and whispers for her to leave the sleeping Kong and come to him for a moment where I thought she might actually refuse. Perhaps recalling that she does have a prospective human lover and a life back in the real world, Anne manages to tear herself away from her beloved Kong and join Jack as they race back to the native village with Kong hot on their heels. A shot from the 33 version of them running through the jungle is beautifully duplicated here. When they arrive, Anne realizes with horror that Denham and Eaglehorn plan to capture Kong and take him back to the New York as a big money making attraction. As Kong kills still more sailors left and right by smashing them, flanging them, and biting them in half, Anne can hardly contain her indignation and heartbreaking at such a fool scheme. Although she must not come to know these helpless guys during the voyage, we see her happily dancing for them at one point. Their violent death now seems to be little or nothing to her, just as the death of several innocent New Yorkers and would-be rescues in Piplands will later have no effect on her while she is in Kong's thrall. She is even furious at Jack for restraining her as Kong smashes his way through the door of the Great Wall. So I guess Kang through all kind of hell to save her didn't keep her erstwhile human love interest out of the old debit column for long. Kong, as everyone knows by now, has get captured and taken back to the Big Apple and made the star of the biggest show on Broadway. We discover that Jack and Anne have drifted apart in the interim, and he goes to the theater to try and win her back, not even knowing that she has left Denham and gotten a job in a chorus line somewhere else. Kong's unveiling to a shocked audience is a grand affair, with Jackson uses as one of the film's most blunted homage to the original, as Jack Bless Denham recites almost word for word the introductory speech Robert Armstrong gave back in 33, and the orchestra strikes up a starring rendition of Mick Stein's famous score. The stage show also consists of a re-enactment of the Natic sacrificial ritual from the old version, but when the shackled Kong wakes up to find that the bleak-eyed blonde actress is being offered to him as bride is not an Ann Darrow, he goes ape and breaks loose. I had to use the term goes ape somewhere. This is when the movie really starts getting good. Kong smashes his way through the front of the theater and goes on a destructive rampage through the icy streets of New York City. Smashes vintage autos and trolley cars, snacking up any balls he sees in search of the real Anne and tossing her aside when she turns out to be wrong one. Jack jumps into an abandoned taxicab and tries to lure Kong anyway, but it is the resulting chase Kong manages to cause even more destruction than before. But just when he catches up to Jack and is about to smash him to a pulp, he senses something and looks around, and there, gliding toward him out of the mist, is his beloved Anne. She leaps into his outstretched hands and off they go to Central Park for a romantic romp on a frozen lake, referred to by some as the thumper scene, where they exchange more selfish gaze until the military arrives to break up their revoir. As the army guys blast away at everything in sight and terrified civilians run for their lives, Kong at last makes his way to the Empire State Building and begins his legendary climb. All else aside, and whenever glimpses I may have, this is still an awesome film packed with one accelerating scene from another. Peter Jackson staging of Kong's last stand atop the Empire's State Building is a magnificent achievement. The attacking biplanes swoop down directly out of the sky toward Kong is several vintage indicating shots as he leaps around fighting them off amidst a hail of bullets. Every time I see the movie, I have to go back and watch this part again because it's simply one of the best action set pieces ever filmed. It's also one of the those are instances in which I am glad they created CGI. Rarely has it ever been employed to such impressive effect, and when it is come to think of it, it's usually is a Peter Jackson film. By this time, Kong has come into his own as a character that we can sympathize with due to both the skill of the SPFX technicians and Andy Gollum Serkis motion capture performance and his final emotional scene with Anne as he clings tenaciously to the side of the building before finally slipping off and falling to the street for a blow is memorable. Even Jack Black's stiff reputation of the original film's final lines somehow work as we reach the staring fade out at least. So there you have it, a rousing, jealously photographed adventure story, a heartfelt tribute to the 1933 version by one of its most ardent fans, and the film that stands on its own and is definitely worth seeing and worth having. Which makes it one great nagging flaw all the more bathroom to me. Maybe if Peter Jackson had not gone so overboard on the Anne Lumsgong angle and used a bit more substantially, it would have worked and might even have made Anne's offering herself to Kong in New York as an attempt to avoid further carnage seems like a more heroic act. But as it is, she must seem abnormally and irrationally obsessed with this giant ape in a vitally romantic way as though he were the man of her dreams, which makes her embrace with Jack at the end seems somewhat contrary. There are, however, an awful lot of people who are utterly enamored with the aspect of the film. So, as with any movie review, take my opinion for what it is and decide for yourself. Anyway, that's the thing that really bugs me about the remake and prevents me from wholeheartedly embracing it. Otherwise, I found the new King Kong highly enjoyable on its own terms. Definitely a worthy effort, although our meat still doesn't quite live up to the first one. King Kong is a great film with superb directing and visual effects, adding more to the evidence that Jackson and Serkis deserves all the praise they receive. Peter Jackson's expensive remake of the 1933 classic follows director Carl Denham and his crew on a journey from New York City to the ominous Skull Island to film a new movie. Accompanying him are playwright Jack Driscoll, Adrian Brody, and actresses Ann Darrow, Naomi Watts, who is whisked away by the monstrous ape Kong after they reach the island. The crew encounters dinosaurs and other creatures as they face to rescue Anne, while the actress forms a bond with her simian captor. I didn't think much about King Kong when I first saw it. It was good at it was too long to keep my interest. This was a few years ago and I have not seen the film in a while. This time around I enjoy it a lot more, but it's still too long. I'll start easy with the acting. Everyone is serviceable in their roles. No one has anything truly difficult to do, but they don't ham it up or just float from scene to scene. Naomi Watts was a good choice for Anne. She's got an athletic look, which means you can understand why Kong falls in love with her, but also you can never hate her for all the screaming she does, and she does do quite a lot. Not only that, but Watts is a good actress, so I am glad they just didn't pick my pretty face of the character. Watts managed to make her fear and terror and sadness all feel real. Adrian Brody was good as Jack. He fitted it the writer role better than the gun-tooting one. His save-the-guard attitude backed me a little, but not enough to hate the guy. Also, I didn't like how quickly he and fall for each other. It seems like 10 minutes went by and suddenly they are in love. I don't hate the character of Jack, but I do think he could have been cut out and not a lot would have been missed. The film did have two great roles. Firstly, Jack Black as Carol. This is probably one of Black's best role outside of a comedy. He really sells the desperate producer act. He lies, he cheats, and he might as well have stole. All to get himself out of the gutter. He is never shown to be a villain or slimy. He is just a man pushed to age and he wants to have his time in the limelight. The second great role is Andy Serkis. Kong Serkis showed that he could use motion capture to great effect with column, and he is no different here. He makes Kong's animalistic action and voice all authentic and frankly quite brilliant. It's hard to believe that it's a man instead of just plain CGI, but Serkis makes the character and the role his own. Now, after watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I know Jackson is a great director, and here is just more evidence. He manages to create an epic scope of this world that times and God has forget from his nightmarish terrible attack to his sweeping shoots of New York and the jungle. Jackson really has an eye for the camera and he knows how to shoot a good action scene. The T-Rex battle is a highlight of the film and Jackson does a fantastic job of it all. The visual effects are also sublime. Kong looks utterly convincing, not as good as he did 7 years ago. Chris, this came out 7 years ago, but still great. In a close-up near the end of the film, you can see every single hair on his face, which even today is impressive. The destruction Kong causes in New York and the panic that everyone has is also wonderful to observe, especially considering that Kong is not really there. For a few seconds, you almost believe he is. Now, for the downside, as I have said before, the film is too long. I have fun with long films, but this feels like it could have lost about 30-40 minutes and it could still be a great film. Even some of the action scenes drag a little. The T-Rex fight, while a highlight did go on a bit, it's not enough to make me bored of the film, but it's enough to make me love interest for a few minutes. Overall, King Kong is a great film with super acting and visual effects, adding more to the evidence that Jackson and Serkis deserve all the praise they receive. The running length is the only major problem, and that's subjective. Definitely see this one and form your own opinion. King Kong, Peter Jackson. The love affair with King Kong began over 3 decades ago when we first saw Marion C. Cooper's classic 1933 film. Jackson even made a first attempt at a Kong remake 9 years ago, but it ultimately failed through. The director put the project aside while the embark on the epic The Lord of the Rings trilogy after the remakeable achievement with Rings became more Critically and commercially, Jackson could name his next project, and every studio in Hollywood was chopping at the bit to land of the director. Naturally, Jackson went to Universal and picked King Kong, so we have King Kong 2005, the third and most elaborate take. The budget is said to be over $200 million on the eighth wonder of the world, where the original film stepped through the major character introduction and had everyone on the boat to the mysterious island just about 20 minutes in. Jackson's New Kong takes its time getting to the meat of the story. We are introduced to director producer Carl Denham, who is having trouble convincing studios as to fund his latest film expedition, a journey to a legendary place known as Skull Island. Denham is in danger of losing the completion funds to his film, so he snags the print and rushes off to gather his crew and depart before the studio can stop him. Denham runs into a major snag when his lead actress pulls out, so he must comb the streets of New York to find the perfect leading lady. He notices a beautiful woman passing by and helps her out of bind. Those familiar with the original will recognize the scene. Her name is Ann Darrow, down on her luck, went while performer without a penny to her name. Denham gives the sales pitch and ultimately convinces her and the rest of the crew that the trip will be worth of their while. Of course, he is also told everyone that they are going to Singapore, not looking for Skull Island. Meanwhile, playwright Jack Driscoll has offered a crook rewrite, but Denham scams his way to bringing the writer along on the trip as well. The supporting players include Thomas Kretschmann as Captain Eaglehorn, Jamie Bell as Jimmy, Colin Hanks as Denham's assistants, Preston Evans Perky as Heist, Kelly Candler as Bruce Bexar, and Andy Serkis as Lumpy the Cook and as King Kong. Sitting on a plane to Manhattan last week on my way to one of the first screenings of King Kong, I decided it would be the perfect time to rewatch the 1933 film beforehand. I had seen the original and remember liking it years ago, but I thought a refresher would help to get me in the mood and give me a proper comparison. What surprised me most about the 1933 film, which runs a brisk 100 minutes, was how well paced and fun it was. You might expect a movie 70 years ago to feel a bit dated, but Kong suffered from none of those downfalls. Sure, the effects are dated by today's standards, but they are still very well done and quite impressive in retrospect. The other aspect of Kong 33 that threw me for a loop was how downright vicious and mean-spirited it was. Kong kills with no remorse, throwing a woman to her teeth, grinding helpless islander into the ground and biting off heads. The film is also incredibly sexual, including a shocking sequence in which Kong tears off part of Fairy's dress, sniffs it, and then saves his own figures. The original is a terrific film that holds up better than I could have possibly expected. Seeing it a mere hours before the new film, Jackson version already had a strike going against it. It knew after 3 hours plus running time beforehand, so I was more than a little curious to see exactly how and why Jackson has chosen to expand the film so much. Could he justify an epic length monster movie? The answer is a resounding no. The first 20 minutes of the new King Kong are abysmal, opening with an allegedly amusing montage of Depression era New York and intercutting scenes of vaudeville. The intro almost makes you think a musical in heads. It's a total cheesy. From there, we get a superfluous backstory on the character of Ann Darrow, who desperately wants to just make people laugh on the vaudeville stages, but the theater where she performs is shut down. She even talks to a kindly old man who gives her some words of wisdom. None of this matters one bit in the final context of the story to come. The character of Carl Denham has also been fleshed out, this time performed with flair by a painfully miscast Jack Black. Enough about the opening thought, I cannot say much more about it because honestly it was putting me to sleep. Finally, lo and behold, we get to the boat. This is where we are introduced to the Jack Driscoll character. Unlike the original, Driscoll is now a writer, but like the original, Darrow has a thing for Driscoll. The boat ride was relatively brief in the original film, but the new Kong spends a significant time period on the ship. Much like The Lord of the Rings, Jackson introduces us to a slew of characters and tries his best to balance them out. Unlike Lord of the Rings, most of these extras characters are not needed. You don't really care that much more what happens to them, especially when the alternative is spending time with the spectacular Kong who is still not on screen 45 minutes into the movie. Finally, we get to the island where the pacing starts to pick up. We meet Kong at what felt to be about an hour into the movie, it might be a bit less. By this time is the original we had already met Kong and he'd already wreaked a bit of havoc, craved Ann and taken her off into the jungle. Just like the original, this is the point where the film really starts to take off. Kong, a combination of full-on CG creation from the genius team at Vita and the motion capture acting work of Andy Serkis, looks amazingly realistic. As I previously mentioned, the Kong of the original film was a monster. He was violent, uncaring, and his attraction to Anne was largely unexplored. This is the aspect that Jackson chose to change the most dramatically and also where he succeeds with flying colors. He humanizes Kong and makes him into the real character. You empathize with the beast, and in some cases, you feel worse for Kong than the bodies he leaves to waste in his path. His characterization also makes for a very interesting love story with the other best character, Ann Darrow. Naomi Watts has the perfect look with facial expressions and physical emotions that travel any silent film star. She is striking opposite Kong, and Jackson does an excellent job expanding on their relations and better explaining the beast's attraction and protective instincts for the blunt beauty. The key moment is the relationship between Kong and Anne, which Jackson nails. Kong's story is a sad one, and you feel for Kong by the end of the movie, but so much of the story doesn't need to be there. Adrien Brody is a fine actor, and there is nothing at all wrong with his performance as Driscoll. It's just that his character doesn't need to be this big a part. Jackson seems to be aiming for some sort of the love triangle, but it's never realized. Brody and Watts never really click, and this relationship only distracts from the central story of Kong and Anne. The casting choice of Jack Black seems a bit of strange choice at first and was met with some dismay by fans. I was willing to give the idea the benefit of the doubt, but it turns out repetition was the correct instinct. Black is simply miscast. This is not a role for him to play, and his presence is a distraction to the part and also the film as a whole. When Black is about to deliver a line, you expect him to say something funny. He smacks even when delivering serious lines of dialogue. This Tenham is more of a con artist than the showman of the original. But with Black playing the part, you expect a joke every line or two he tries to deliver on this, but rarely is he actually funny. As the story turns towards a more serious note, telling the sad story of a lonely beast, Black's presence in this film makes even less sense. Kong's entrance also marks the beginning of a number of heavy lead and effect sequence. I will not discuss them any details because they are the film's shining moments and I don't want to ruin them for you. Kong's spectacular T-Rex battle is stunning in scope and length. It goes on and delivered in all points. Crowds are going to love it and Veta will likely take home the epic Oscar for this sequence alone. Fans of the original probably know for the infamous spider pit sequence, which has been forever lost. Jackson crafted a spider pit sequence too, and all spider pit sequences are nightmarish snare raffle with technical gravity and horrifying thrills. The rest of the effects were continuously to be stiller from the other almost countless monster and critter encounters and onto New York City. Jackson and Vita effectively create a believable 1930 New York. It's ultra bright like a classic MGM musical, possible so much so that some may think it looks a bit fake, but it worked for me. Kong's exploring of New York is pretty spectacular and it gives life up to the hype. The Empire State ending is spectacular, intense, and heartbreaking at all once. King Kong is worth seeing, especially on the big screen. Quite simple, Jackson tries to do so much and goes off in too many directions. He goes in with the same instincts that serves him so well in Lord of the Rings, but fails to realize this is not an epic storyline, it's still a monster movie. No matter how much he makes us care for Kong, there doesn't need to be a dozen characters. We don't need to know every bit of backstory for every character. We want Kong. Technically, Jackson rises the bar once again. The action and visuals are stunning, everything looks great, and when we finally get to the action, Jackson's completely delivers. All in all, King Kong 2005 is a pretty decent film, but it could have been a very good film. Shave off a good 45 minutes and recast the Carol Denham part, and Jackson may have even achieved greatness. 3 out of 5. Everything good and bad about the 2005 King Kong remake in one scene. In the last decade, Peter Jackson 2005 remake of King Kong, which turns 10 years ago this Christmas weekend, has come to represent everything that's gone wrong with the Lord of the Rings tractor carrier since that trilogy was an audience and critical favorite. Kong released too heavily on computerized special effects, it lacks any real sense of what to cut and what to leave in. Its 1930 period trapping creates the sense of selfish devotion to the 1933 original, which is probably true given how much Jackson loved that film, and it presumes that we are super invested in the grand tragedy of a giant gorilla who died. But at the time of its release, reviewers of the film are recaptures noted Lord of the Rings spectator Roger Ebert, for instance, gave King Kong a rave 4-star review, and there was a general feeling that the film just might replicate Jackson Octor's success with the Elliot trilogy. Instead, the movie staged it out at the box office and though it won 3 Oscars, none of them were in major categories. So who was right, those early critics or the public that obviously found the things strange? Would you believe both? How you feel about this movie boils down to how you feel about the notion of a love story between a very human woman and a very semen giant gorilla. No, the two don't have an actual romance or anything, but Naomi Watts and Andy Serkis, who gave the motion capture performance used to create King Kong, share a very real chemistry. As you can see in the film's best scene embedded atop this article, Kong, who lost in a hostile New York that want to destroy him, takes Anne out into a snowy Central Park. The two find a frozen lake flagged up lit by evergreen trees. This film's subtle Christmas trapping give it a rosy glow of nostalgia which fits well with the period setting, and then the gorilla, for the first time in his life, slides around on the ice. It's a little spiritually interrupted by those who are trying to kill the big ape. But it's the kind of peaceful, beautiful moment that only a film this long would have leave room for. That probably the paradox of Jackson's King Kong. It really doesn't need to be 3 hour long, but the only reason it's very good is that it's a 3 hour long. The long portion of the film before we meet the titular gorilla is mostly unnecessary, but it is nicely set apart of the character who lives all interest with Kong and ultimately entrust his life. Peter Jackson followed up his absurdly successful and groundbreaking Lord of the Rings trilogy with another absurdly long visual spectacle, 2005 King Kong. This is an okay movie but definitely an disappointment given Peter Jackson's previous track record of adapting beloved properties. The movie is way too long and way too self-important. It stays pretty true to the original 1933 films but just takes forever to tell the same exact story. It does keep its 1933 setting though, which is kind of fun. The movie has some bizarre casting choice. Jack Black as Carl Denham, the film director, but absolutely triumphed in the casting of Naomi as Ann Darrow, the Wei Ray role. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that I am tempted to skip whenever I rewatch it. Nobody sets foot on Skull Island until almost an hour into the movie, and before that, we have to sit by and watch a Hatchinite love plot between Anne and Jack Driscoll. Adrian Brody, the pianist. Brody's performance is pretty lacking in my opinion. There's some good stuff on Skull Island, of course. The creatures mostly look great, though there are a few bad shots. There's an alligator scene in which many of the characters are at the bottom of the pit and get attacked by giant disgusting bugs. It's absolutely disgusting and it seems like a throwback to when Peter Jackson was making Sherlocky horror movies. There's some great stuff with Kong too. It's the same stuff we have seen before. Kong is infatuated with Anne, but Anne maintains some kind of power over him. When Kongs end up in the New York, it's the same kind of stuff you had expected to see, but it's mostly pretty good. The biggest problem with this movie is certainly the length. If you could remove a lot of the fat from the movie, you had have an excellent 2 hours and 15 minutes long movie. Instead, you have a movie that's over 300. Peter Jackson, King Kong, 1998, but not. It is released in 2005. King Kong is a 2005 monster adventure film directed by Peter Jackson and starring Andy Serkis and Naomi Watts. It's a overpulled beyond properties, but overall it's quite a spectacle. Actors they travel the world, all they ever see in the mirror. This is the remake of the 1933 original that remains a classic and the quintessential version of this story. Peter Jackson is obviously a huge fan of it, and that admiration can clearly be seen in this remake where he loves every single sequence so much that he ended up doubling or quadrupling them in length. I have never been a fan of this director, and this movie is a great example of everything that he does good and all of his worst tendencies. Yes, the movie is a spectacle done in the old-fashioned style of the last century, but only elevated by computer-generated effects and more gracious action scenes. The adventurous spirit is still here, and the film can be quite enhancing at times, not to mention rather epic. But in trying to make it as big of a spectacle as it could possibly be, he overdid every minute detail and sequence to the point that it becomes needlessly overblown and just plain tiring to watch. You have got here over an hour of story before they even get to Skull Island, and that was a problem. Ultimately, the movie became exhausting to watch, even though the director's intentions were clearly great. What this movie actually does better than the original is the central relationship between a beast and a woman. As it is 3 hours long, the movie focused a lot on this interesting relationship, and the two are the heart of the movie, leading to that ending being all more sad and powerful. Whenever the film focused on just on these two, it was lovely. Naomi Watts is excellent as Ann Darrow, and Andy Serkis is per usual fantastic. The motion capture is incredible in this film. Jack Black is memorable as his annoying, greedy film producer, and the film really captured the 30s with the strong emphasis on how studios worked back then. Adrian Brody as Jack Driscoll is just okay but a bit forgettable. Kong has to fight many dinosaurs here in what was surely an overkill, as everything is in this overblown movie, but most of it was widely entertaining. There is no denying that the movie captured the adventurous element very well, with the arrival on the island being quite wonderful. The action was overwhelming, but some of the animal fights were terrific. It depends what person you are as it regards your enjoyment of the film's action. I am more into one-on-one fight and I dislike weaponry, so obviously the scene where the humans were attacking Kong bored me while the animal fights were to me rather cool and fun. This King Kong has fantastic special effects. Kong looks incredible. The eyes of Serkis behold a lot of heart behind them, and the island looks incredible, especially the dinosaurs. It was a groundbreaking movie usually for its time, and it still looks marvelous. The score is also strong and some of the dialogue is quite good, but the pacing is horrible, dragging at times. The action is overwhelming and the movie is simple too long. Peter Jackson King Kong is a respectable but troublesome remake. The director has the tendency to overblow every single scene beyond any reasonable proportion, which is exactly what happened in this 3 hour long movie filled with extremely prolonged, endless scene after scene. The movie is quite adventurous at times. Some of the monster fight on the island are super cool, and the VFX were groundbreaking for this time, and they still look great. The highlight is the central beast-woman relationship that is actually better here than it was in the original thanks to wonderful work from Andy Serkis and Naomi Watts. The film is well intentioned and frequently quite charming, but its exclusive runtime was its ultimate doom.